Have you ever wondered where all these life forms came from? You may have some ideas as to whether they appeared all of a sudden or they came gradually from simple organisms to more complex organisms. Well, scientists have such ideas too. So that is the first part of this chapter on origin of life, as to what are the possible ways that life might have come from inanimate chemicals. So the idea that life came from non-living components that were found at the beginning of the earth, came from very simple concept that we as humans did not exist for more than, say, 200 to 300 years. Even just recently, they found evidence that there are fossils that modern humans may have been as old as 400,000 years. But what happened before that? About 1,000,000 years. Think about 1,000 million years, that is 1,000,000,000 years, or 4 billion years. So when you go back in those time records, there are different types of evidence that we can collect from, and that those are the fossil evidence that kind of give us an idea that life came from very simple organisms and evolved into more complex organisms such as humans or elephants or whales or trees and things like that. But prior to that simplest form of life, what was there? How did that simple form of life come about? So that is the topic of this chapter. So the first part of the chapter, you think about different ideas or hypotheses that scientists contemplated before they did any experiment. The second part talks about, if you hypothesize the life came from elements that are non-living, the basic chemicals that were around at the early stages of Earth, what were the conditions of the early stages of the Earth? And how can you prove from simple chemicals such as methane, water, and nitrogen and other elements present at that time that the chemicals needed to make the early form came about? That is the first set of experiment done. Then you have to also establish a logic. How can a chemical from basic elements combine together to make a first living organism that can code for information, they can store information, do metabolism, and replicate and produce and evolve? So that is the next stage of transition that the chapter talks about. Then if you have evidence that a particular molecule, such as RNA, can code for information and also catalyze reactions, what is the scientific evidence? So that is the third part of the chapter that talks about. So at the end, you will see an idea that the earliest form of life must have come from simple elements combined to make molecules that are essential to build complex molecules such as RNA and proteins and so on, that will eventually form a prebiotic structures like a cell-like structures, but that did not happen overnight. It took billions of years, in several hundred or 1,000 million years. That's again coming to that billion-year time period. So that is kind of hard for us to fathom. Once you have that, so we'll see from that simple cell what are the different life forms exist. That's where the classification of life comes in. That's where this chapter wraps up. And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about the structure and function of the cells, which will also kind of support the evidence that living cells have originated and also they have been replicating based on the chemicals they have within themselves.